A lawyer's office smells of mahogany and bad news, but the smell of betrayal is something distinct. It smells like expensive cologne, masking the scent of rot. I sat in the plush leather chair, gripping the armrests so hard my knuckles turned white. My hands are rough, stained with the permanent grease of 50 years as a machinist, and they looked out of place against the pristine, polished wood of the conference table. I am Henry Vance. I am 74 years old, and for the last 5 years, I was the only person who visited my father in the drafty farmhouse where he wasted away.
'48 Ford F1 truck. Silence hung in the room for a heartbeat. Then Richard laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound, devoid of humor. Richard asked, unable to help himself. That thing hasn't run in 30 years. It's sitting on cinder blocks. The tires are dust. He looked at me, his eyes dancing with malice. Did you hear that, Henry? You got the truck. Cynthia leaned over, patting my hand with a touch that felt like ice. Her nails were manicured to sharp points. Oh, Henry, I'm sorry, but look on the bright side. I'm sure you can get scrap value for it, maybe a few $100s. I felt the humiliation burn my cheeks. It traveled down my neck, hot and prickly. It wasn't about the money. I have never cared about being rich. It was about the dismissal. It was about the erasure. My father had reduced my entire life, my loyalty, my care for him in his final years, to a pile of oxidized metal and mouse droppings. That is the entirety of the bequests, Mr. Sterling said, closing the folder. I have the keys here, one for the estate, and one. He slid a heavy brass key across the table toward Richard. Then he slid a small, rusted piece of metal toward me. I picked it up. It felt gritty. Sign here, Mr. Sterling said. I signed the papers. My handwriting was steady, despite the rage boiling in my blood. I stood up. Henry, Richard said, standing up to button his suit jacket. Don't be a stranger. Once we sell the estate, we'll have a big party. You should come. Maybe park the truck out front. He and Cynthia laughed again. They popped a bottle of champagne they had brought with them, the cork flying across the room and hitting the law books with a dull thud. I walked out without a word. I walked out into the gray, drizzling rain, feeling the weight of that rusty key in my pocket.
But as I stared at that rusted grill, watching the water run down the faded paint like tears, I realized my father never did anything without a reason. He was a paranoid genius, not a fool. If you've ever been underestimated by people who measure worth in dollar signs, hit that subscribe button, because what I found under that hood didn't just change my life, it ended theirs. I spent the next week alone in my garage. It is a small space, cluttered with tools and the smell of oil and sawdust, but it is mine. It is the only place in the world where I make the rules. The truck was a disaster. It sat in the center of the bay, dripping rusty water onto the concrete. The tires were rotted through, the rubber cracked and flaking like old skin. The upholstery was mouse-eaten, smelling of ammonia and decay. Every time I touched a bolt, it fought me, seized by decades of oxidation. But I started stripping it down. I am a mechanic. It's what I do. I heal broken things. I take what the world has thrown away, and I make it sing again. It was my therapy. It was my way of saying goodbye to the father who had insulted me from the grave. On Tuesday, Richard called me. I almost didn't answer, but I wiped the grease from my hands and picked up the phone. "Henry," he said. His voice was loud, echoing. He was on speakerphone, likely in a large room. I asked, looking at the seized lug nut I was trying to turn. "12 million, Henry," he bragged. I could hear the smile in his voice. 12 million for the house alone. And the portfolio? Another 8. Cynthia is looking at yachts. Can you believe it? "Good for you, Richard," I said. "Oh, we will," he said. "We're listing the property Monday. Quick sale. We want cash. Listen, if you need help moving that junker, well, don't call me." He hung up. I stood there for a moment, listening to the dial tone.
Then I threw the phone onto the workbench. It slid across the wood and hit a jar of bolts. 12 million, I whispered to the empty room. I turned back to the truck. All right, you miserable pilot junk. I focused on the engine. It was a flathead V8, the original heart of the beast. It was covered in 50 years of sludge, oil, and grime, a black, shapeless lump that looked more like a tumor than a machine. I hooked up the chainfall. I bolted the chains to the block. I pulled the chains, grunting with the effort. Clink, clink, clink. The engine lifted slowly. It swung in the air, heavy as a tombstone, oddly heavy.
I've pulled hundreds of engines in my life. I know the weight of cast iron. This felt denser. It fought gravity with a stubbornness that surprised me. I lowered it onto the engine stand. The metal stand groaned under the weight. I grabbed my scraper and a bottle of heavy-duty solvent. "Let's get you clean," I muttered. I started scraping away the sludge from the valve covers. It was thick, caked on like tar. I had to chip at it. The scraper slipped. My hand jerked forward. The sharp steel edge of the tool gouged deep into the metal of the valve cover. I cursed, expecting to see the bright silver scratch of steel or the dull gray of cast iron. I froze. I leaned in closer, squinting under the shop lights. The scratch wasn't silver. It wasn't gray. It gleamed yellow. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, or maybe a layer of old primer paint. I grabbed a clean rag and soaked it in acetone. I scrubbed the spot. I scrubbed harder, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The black paint and grime dissolved, wiping away to reveal the metal beneath. It wasn't steel. It was heavy, soft, yellow metal. Gold. I dropped the rag. I stepped back, bumping into the workbench. "No," I whispered. I grabbed the scraper again. I attacked the oil pan. I gouged it. Gold. I attacked the intake manifold. Gold. I attacked the air cleaner assembly. Gold. I sat back on my stool, the room spinning around me. I felt lightheaded. I looked at the engine block hanging there, innocent and dirty. My father hadn't left me a truck. He hadn't left me a rust bucket. He had melted down his fortune, bars of bullion he had hoarded since the 70s, and cast them into engine parts. He had painted them black, covered them in grease, and installed them in a truck that didn't run to hide them from the IRS, the banks, and his greedy, smooth-talking younger son. I needed verification. My highs were deceiving me. They had to be. I called Saul. Saul was an old friend from the war. We had served in Vietnam together. He ran a high-end jewelry exchange downtown. He was the only man I knew who could keep a secret and knew the difference between fool's gold and the real thing. "Saul," I said when he answered, "I need you to come to the garage." "Henry, it's midnight. Bring your testing kit," I said. He arrived 20 minutes later, looking disheveled but alert. He walked in, took one look at my face, and locked the door behind him. He asked. I pointed to the engine. Saul walked over. He looked at the scratches. He pulled out a small stone and a bottle of acid. He scraped the valve cover against the stone, leaving a golden streak. He applied the acid. We watched. The streak didn't fade. It didn't turn green. It stayed bright, defiant yellow. Saul looked at me, his eyes wide, his mouth hanging slightly open. "Henry," he whispered, "this is 24 karat. Pure. It's soft." He ran his hand over the valve cover. "These parts, just the valve covers alone, are worth $500,000. The intake, the block." He did a quick calculation in his head. "You're looking at $20 million of raw bullion hiding in plain sight." Saul said, "Maybe more. $20 million. The exact amount Richard had bragged about. But why? Why hide it? Why give me the gold and Richard the houses?" Then the twist. I remembered the glove box. I hadn't opened it yet. I had been too focused on the engine. I walked over to the cab of the truck. I pulled the latch. It was stuck. I yanked it hard. It popped open in a cloud of dust. Inside, there was a single leather-bound logbook. I opened it. It was my father's handwriting. Spiky, aggressive script. It wasn't a maintenance log. It was a letter. "Henry, if you're reading this, you fixed the truck.
You are the only one with the patience to do it. You are the only one who ever cared about how things worked, not just what they were worth. I know you're angry. I know you think I left you nothing, but you need to listen to me. The accounts Richard got, they're leveraged. I took out massive loans against the estate, the beach house, and the portfolio to buy this gold. Every single asset Richard inherited is collateral for debt. I haven't paid a mortgage in 5 years. I haven't paid property taxes in 10. The fortune is a shell game, Henry. It's hollow. The banks will seize the houses in 30 days. The moment probate clears, the liens will activate. Richard thinks he's a millionaire, but he's about to inherit the biggest bankruptcy in state history. The only real asset. The only thing the banks don't know about. The only thing the government can't find is this engine. I made it for you. Don't tell him. Let him have the paper. You take the gold. Love. Dad. I closed the book. My hands were shaking. The grief washed over me, heavy and suffocating. My father hadn't hated me. He had protected me. In his own twisted, paranoid way, he had saved me.
He knew Richard. He knew Richard would sell the houses the moment he died. He knew Richard would blow the money. So he gave Richard the trap, and he gave me the bait. I looked at the engine. It wasn't just gold. It was justice. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest, replacing the humiliation I had felt in the lawyer's office. Richard didn't inherit an empire. He inherited a ticking time bomb of debt. He was standing on a trap door, popping champagne, waiting for the fall. And I was the only one with the shelter. I looked at Saul. Saul asked, "We paint it," I said. "We paint it Ford blue. We make it look like just another old engine. For the phone to ring," I said. Panic has a specific vibration. It hums through a phone line like a high-tension wire about to snap, transmitting fear before a single word is spoken. I was standing in the center of my garage, the air thick with the smell of curing paint and sawdust, when my phone buzzed on the workbench. It was 3 weeks since I had towed the rust bucket home. 3 weeks of sleepless nights, bruised knuckles, and a secret so heavy it felt like it was altering the gravity of the room. The Ford F1 was finished. The body was a deep, midnight blue that looked black in the shadows. The chrome, what little I could salvage, gleamed. And the engine, the heart of the beast, was painted a standard, unassuming Ford blue. It looked like a solid, reliable flathead V8. It looked like cast iron. It looked like nothing worth stealing. I picked up the phone. The voice on the other end was jagged, breathless. It was Richard. "Are you there? Pick up, damn it." I wiped my hands on a shop rag, taking my time. Richard's voice was usually smooth, coated in the expensive lacquer of private schools and boardrooms. Now it sounded like he was drowning. "I'm here, Richard," I said, leaning against the fender of the truck. "What kind of problem?" "I thought you were in Malibu." "There is no beach house," he stammered. I could hear traffic in the background, loud and chaotic. "I mean, there is, but we can't get in. The locks." "Henry, listen to me. The bank, the executors, the creditors. Dad." "He leveraged everything," Richard's voice cracked. "There are liens, millions in liens. We tried to access the investment portfolio this morning to pay the retainer for the probate lawyer, and the account was flagged. It's empty, Henry. It's all debt. He borrowed against the Connecticut estate to buy—"
God, I don't even know what he bought, but the money's gone. They're foreclosing. That sounds stressful, I said. My voice was flat, steady. Inside, I felt a cold satisfaction, like a gear finally clicking into place. Dad's letter hadn't lied. Stressful? We're going to lose the condo in the city. We leveraged that against the inheritance, Richard yelled, losing his composure. We need cash, Henry, fast, to pay the lawyers to stop the seizure. I remembered the truck. You fixed it up, right? Okay, good. Maybe we can sell it. Get a quick 50 grand? I know the market for classic trucks is hot right now. Technically, I corrected him, looking at the blue valve covers under the hood, it was a specific bequest. It's mine, he screamed. We are family. I need help. We are coming over. We're going to list it on Bring a Trailer tonight. Just, if you want to see it, I said, come to the garage tonight, around 7. I'm having a little unveiling party. We'll be there, he snapped, and the line went dead. I looked at the truck. I looked at the blue paint hiding the truth. I patted the fender. You beat me, I whispered to the machine. I spent the next few hours making calls. I didn't call buyers. I called witnesses. I called Saul, my old friend from the war who knew the truth about the metal. I called 3 of my mechanic buddies from the old shop, men with grease under their nails and zero tolerance for pretension. I called Mrs. Gable, the neighbor Richard had snubbed at the funeral. And finally, I called Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson was the bank executor handling the Vance estate. I had met him briefly during the initial audit. He was a man of numbers, cold and precise. I told him I had information regarding the assets of Arthur Vance that might clarify the insolvency issues. He agreed to come, curious about what a retired machinist could possibly contribute to a $12 million bankruptcy case. By 7 p.m., the garage was full. I had set up a few folding chairs and a cooler of beer. The mood was low-key, confused. My friends were admiring the bodywork on the truck, running their hands over the curves of the fenders, nodding in approval. The truck sat in the center of the bay, covered by a heavy canvas tarp. At 7:15, a car pulled into the driveway. It wasn't Richard's usual Porsche, nor was it Cynthia's Range Rover. It was a dented beige sedan with a rental agency sticker on the bumper. They stormed into the garage.
Richard looked 10 years older than he had 3 weeks ago. His suit was wrinkled. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was wild. Cynthia was trailing behind him, looking shell-shocked. Her mascara was running, dark streaks cutting through her foundation. She was carrying a designer handbag that looked like a shield she was afraid to lower. They stopped just inside the door, blinking in the harsh fluorescent shop lights. They looked at the crowd, Saul leaning against the workbench, Mr. Henderson sitting stiffly on a folding chair, my mechanic friends drinking Miller High Life. "Richard?" demanded, ignoring the guests completely. He looked at me with wild, desperate eyes. "Where is the truck? Henry, we don't have time for a social hour." "Relax, brother," I said, stepping forward. I was wearing my work coveralls. I felt comfortable in them. This was my domain. I wanted you to see it run first. Cynthia shrieked, her voice shrill and breaking. "It's old metal. Who cares if it runs? We need the money, Henry. They took the cards." "I invited Mr. Henderson," I said, gesturing to the man in the gray suit. Richard froze. He looked at the banker. The blood drained from his face. "Mr. Richard stammered. Why are you here? We're handling the liquidation." "I am here at Mr. Henry Vance's invitation," Mr. Henderson said calmly, not standing up. "Richard?" shouted, spinning back to me. "He's just a mechanic." I walked over to the tarp. I grabbed the corner. "You called it a rust bucket," I said. I pulled the tarp off. The canvas slid to the floor with a heavy flack. The 48 Ford sat there, gleaming under the lights. The midnight blue paint looked like liquid water. The chrome grille caught the reflection of everyone in the room. It was beautiful. It was a work of art, restored with a level of detail that only obsession can produce. The mechanics murmured in appreciation. "She's a beauty, Henry," one of them whispered. Richard stared at it. He didn't see the beauty. He saw a price tag. "It looks nice," Cynthia sniffed, wiping her nose. She sounded disappointed. She wanted it to look like gold, not a truck. "But it's just a truck. Henry, please, we are losing the house. Sell it. Give us the money. You owe us." "I owe you nothing," I said. My voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the silent garage. "I took care of him. I fed him. I changed his sheets. You handled the finances?" Richard yelled. "Dad was senile."
He made excellent investments, I said. I walked to the front of the truck. I reached under the grill and popped the hood latch. Clunk. I lifted the heavy steel hood. The engine bay was immaculate, wires tucked, hoses fresh, and sitting in the center was the flathead V8, painted a pristine, matte Ford blue. Richard looked at it. He scoffed. "So, you painted the engine. Congratulations." "It adds weight," I said. I picked up a bottle of industrial acetone and a clean white rag from the workbench. "Richard?" asked, stepping closer. "Dad left a note," I said, looking Mr. Henderson directly in the eye. "He said the accounts were empty because he invested in heavy metal." I poured the acetone onto the rag. The smell was sharp, chemical. I leaned over the fender. I placed the rag on the valve cover. "Cynthia!" yelled. I started scrubbing. The blue paint, fresh and uncured, dissolved instantly under the chemical assault. It smeared away, leaving a dark streak. I scrubbed harder, and then it broke through. The light from the overhead shop lamps hit the metal. It didn't reflect like steel. It didn't absorb like iron. It glowed. A rich, buttery, unmistakably yellow shine cut through the gloom of the engine bay. I scrubbed faster, widening the hole in the paint. A patch of gold the size of my hand appeared. The room went silent, the kind of silence that happens when the world shifts on its axis. I moved to the air cleaner assembly. I scrubbed. Gold. I moved to the intake manifold. I scrubbed. Gold. "My God," Saul whispered, stepping forward. He pulled out his loupe, though he didn't need it. "It's the whole top end, Henry." "Cast," I said. "Solid cast. Dad ran his own foundry in the 70s. Richard's knees gave out. He literally grabbed the fender of the truck to keep from hitting the concrete. His eyes were bulging, fixed on the valve cover. He hid it in the truck." "Approximately 400 pounds of it," I said calmly. "Depending on the purity of the casting in the lower block, you are looking at roughly $16 million at current spot prices." $16 million. The number hung in the air. It was more than the dead. It was salvation. It was freedom. Cynthia shrieked. It was a primal sound of greed. She lunged forward, reaching for the engine as if she could grab the gold with her bare hands. "That's part of the estate, the liquid assets." "No," I said. I blocked her with my arm.
I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the folded copy of the last will and testament. Article 5. I read aloud, my voice steady. I pointed to the glowing yellow metal. "This engine is inside it," I said. "It is the truck. It is the specific bequest. It is not a liquid asset." Mr. Henderson stepped forward. He walked to the truck. He looked at the gold. He looked at the paint dissolving under the acetone fumes. He looked at Richard. "Mr. Vance is correct," Mr. Henderson said. His voice was the voice of the bank. Impersonal. Final. The truck was a specific bequest, separated from the general estate by clear language. He turned to Richard. "Richard, however, you inherited the residuary estate, which includes the real property and the investment accounts, and consequently the debts attached to them, which means you still owe the bank $12 million. Richard looked at the gold, salvation, sitting inches away, radiating warmth, and then at me. The realization crushed him. I saw it happen. I saw the arrogance break. He realized that every insult, every time he mocked my garage, every time he called the truck a rust bucket, he had been mocking his own lifeline. He had chosen the paper empire. He had chosen the flash. And now he was holding the bag. "Henry," Richard begged. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the sweat on his brow. He reached out a hand to touch my shoulder. "Please, we'll be homeless. They're taking everything. Dad wouldn't want this." "Dad planned this," I said, my voice as cold as the metal under my hand. "He left a logbook, Richard. He wrote it down. He knew you'd take the easy money. He knew you'd leave me the scraps." Richard wailed. "I'm not doing anything," I said. I slammed the hood shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the small space. Clang. "I'm keeping the truck," I said. "Saul is brokering the sale of the intake manifold to pay off my mortgage and set up a nice retirement fund. The rest? The block?" I patted the hood. "I think I'll drive it for a while. It rides heavy." I walked around to the driver's side. I opened the door. The hinge didn't squeak. I had oiled it. I climbed in. The seat was firm. I put the key in the ignition. Cynthia screamed, banging on the window. I turned the key. The starter whined for a second, heavy and slow against the weight of the golden flywheel. Then it caught. Vroom. The engine roared to life. It wasn't the tinny sound of steel.
It was a deep, throaty, expensive rumble, a vibration that shook the ground and rattled the tools on the walls. It was the sound of victory. I put it in gear. The garage door was open. The night air was cool and inviting. "Move," I said to my brother. Richard stumbled back, defeated, broken, looking small next to the machine he had despised. I eased the clutch out. The truck rolled forward, heavy and unstoppable. I drove out of the garage, into the driveway, and onto the street. I didn't look back at the rearview mirror. I didn't need to see them standing in the exhaust fumes, holding nothing but a legacy of debt and the memory of the gold they were too arrogant to see. The road ahead was dark, but the headlights cut through it, bright and steady. I had a full tank of gas and $16 million under my right foot. I drove into the night, finally free.